Why the avoidance ego crumbles when you go no contact. Have you ever noticed that the moment you finally pull away, when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop proving your worth, suddenly the person who acted like they didn't care starts to unravel? It's not magic, it's psychology. And today, I want to show you exactly why the avoidance ego begins to crumble the moment you go no contact. When you've been with someone emotionally avoidant, it often feels like you're always reaching out. You're the one bridging the distance, trying to connect, trying to make it work. But here's the twist. Avoidants feed on emotional control. They maintain safety by staying one step ahead, by being the one who needs less. And as long as you're reaching for them, their ego is comfortable. They feel desired, superior, in control. But when you finally step back, when you go no contact, something seismic happens inside them. The emotional equilibrium shifts. For the first time, they're not the one being pursued. They're not being validated. Their silence no longer gives them power. It exposes their fear. Because for an avoidant, the loss of control is terrifying. It's not just about losing you, it's about losing the reflection of themselves they once managed through you. And that's when their ego begins to crack. Suddenly, they start to wonder, why aren't you chasing me anymore? Was I not that important? Have I been replaced? Their pride takes a hit, and the very defense mechanism they used to protect themselves, distance, becomes the weapon that wounds them. And that's why no contact isn't revenge, it's clarity. It's the moment you stop fighting for their approval and start protecting your peace. Because the strongest thing you can do in love isn't to prove your worth. It's to stop negotiating it. Avoidants thrive on control because control is their version of safety. For them, emotional closeness feels risky. Vulnerability reminds them of a time when being open led to rejection, disappointment, or feeling trapped. So they build a pattern, stay slightly detached, keep the upper hand, and never need too much. This isn't something they consciously plan. It's an emotional survival mechanism that gives them a sense of stability. As long as they're the ones pulling away, they can manage the fear of being hurt. Control becomes a shield that keeps their ego intact. When you're involved with an avoidant, you can feel that subtle imbalance. You might be the one initiating texts, smoothing over conflicts, or trying to pull them closer. They often appear calm, even indifferent, while you feel anxious and uncertain. But underneath that calm exterior is a hidden dependency. They rely on your pursuit to feel wanted without having to risk vulnerability. Your effort reassures them that they're still desirable, still the one who gets to decide when and how the connection deepens. That's how their ego stays fed, through your consistency, your patience, your emotional labor. The moment you go no contact, that dynamic breaks. The source of validation disappears, and the avoidant suddenly loses the quiet power they held over the relationship. They may not have wanted closeness, but they did want the certainty that you would always be there, waiting for them to come around. Without that assurance, a deep discomfort starts to rise. The very control that once protected them now feels like a trap of their own making. It's not that they suddenly realize how much they love you, at least not right away. What they feel first is the collapse of ego control. The silence you leave behind creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, their sense of superiority begins to waver. They start to question their importance. They wonder if they misjudged your devotion, or if perhaps you found someone else. This isn't about missing emotional intimacy, it's about missing the role they played, the one where they could be desired without having to give too much. Control for the avoidant isn't just about distance, it's about emotional predictability. They manage relationships like equations. If they give less, they can't be hurt as much. But when no contact removes your side of the equation, the math stops working. The predictability vanishes. Their carefully constructed self-image, the one that says, "I don't need anyone," starts to feel shaky. They begin to realize that being unreachable doesn't make them powerful if no one is reaching anymore. That's the quiet irony. Avoidants crave independence, but it's your attention that allows them to feel in control of it. Without that external source of affirmation, their ego loses its balance. The detachment that once felt safe now feels isolating. In that discomfort, some avoidants will try to reassert control. They might reappear with casual messages or emotional bait. Others retreat further, hoping the feeling passes. But inside, the loss of control leaves a mark. It forces them to face a truth they've spent years avoiding. Control can protect the ego, but it can never replace genuine connection. Your silence is not just an absence of words, it becomes a mirror that reflects everything the avoidant has been trying not to see. When you go no contact, you strip away the noise, the texts, the reassurance, the constant emotional cushioning that allowed them to avoid facing themselves. For the first time, there's no one on the other end to absorb their distance or soften their coldness. They are left alone with the emotional emptiness they've been running from. What they used to call peace or space now feels like isolation, and in that silence, they start to encounter the truth behind their avoidance. Avoidants often operate from a deep fear of being consumed by love or of losing their autonomy. They tell themselves they want independence, that they're just not the clingy type. But that narrative only works when there's someone still reaching for them, someone proving that they're wanted while they maintain control. When you remove yourself from that equation, they're forced to face the silence, and in that silence, their inner world begins to echo. Every unhealed wound, every old rejection, every moment they pushed someone away to feel safe comes back like an unanswered message. Your silence challenges the illusion they built about themselves. They believe they didn't need anyone, that they were above emotional chaos, that they could take or leave relationships without consequence. But when the noise fades and your energy is gone, they realize the stillness isn't peaceful, it's hollow. The absence of your voice, your warmth, your energy becomes a mirror, showing them how emotionally disconnected they've become. It's no longer about you doing something wrong or them being right. It's about them seeing, maybe for the first time, how their pattern of emotional avoidance leaves them empty, even when they think they're in control. In that quiet, they may start to replay memories, moments, and conversations they once dismissed. The things you said that they brushed off suddenly carry weight. The effort you gave that they took for granted now feels like something precious they let slip away. This reflection doesn't come from sudden self-awareness or maturity, it comes from discomfort. The silence you create removes the distraction of your presence, leaving them with nothing but themselves. And that's the hardest person for them to sit with. What makes your silence powerful is that it doesn't attack or demand, it simply reveals. When you stop talking, they can no longer project their fears onto you. They can't accuse you of being too much or too emotional. They're left to confront their own emotional absence, their own fear of being vulnerable, their own tendency to push love away. It's a mirror that shows them not who you were in the relationship, but who they were when faced with intimacy. And while an avoidant might not admit it out loud, that reflection shakes them deeply. Because beneath the layers of control and distance, they see what your silence truly means, that love can walk away, that connection can end, and that the safety they clung to was really just a wall keeping them from the very closeness they secretly crave. When you go no contact, the first thing that crumbles for the avoidant isn't their heart, it's their ego. This distinction is important because what they feel initially isn't love or longing in the way most people understand it. It's a bruised pride, a shock to their sense of control. For an avoidant, much of their self-worth is tied to being desired without having to reciprocate too deeply. Your consistent effort, your patience, your emotional presence, all of that served as silent proof that they were special, wanted, and in charge. When you suddenly withdraw that validation, the structure that kept their ego comfortable begins to crack. At first, they may tell themselves they don't care. They might even double down on the idea that detachment is power. But beneath that surface calm, a quiet panic begins to stir. They start to wonder why you're no longer reaching out, why the dynamic they relied on has shifted. Their thoughts are not about missing you emotionally, but about trying to make sense of the loss of control. They question whether they've lost their grip on your attention, and that realization stings. It threatens the story they've told themselves, that they were always the one who could take or leave the connection on their terms. The ego's collapse often begins subtly. They may check your social media, trying to see if you've moved on. They may bring up your name in conversation just to gauge others' reactions. Some even reach out under the guise of curiosity, pretending to be indifferent while secretly craving proof that they still matter. Every ignored message or unanswered silence becomes a small blow to their pride. Because for the avoidant, your lack of pursuit isn't just a lack of contact, It's a reflection that they're no longer the center of your emotional world. That loss of importance is something their ego doesn't know how to process. Their reactions can seem contradictory. One moment, they appear angry or defensive. The next, nostalgic or regretful. But these shifts aren't signs of emotional clarity. They're the ego's attempts to regain balance. They might remember the moments you cared for them, not because they miss the feeling, but because those memories prove their worth. The avoidance ego feeds on being wanted. It struggles when that validation disappears. And without your steady reassurance, the cracks deepen. They're forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that their emotional detachment doesn't protect them from pain. It only delays it. What begins as ego bruising can over time open the door to genuine reflection. But in the beginning, it's rarely about love. It's about loss of control, of admiration, of the emotional leverage they once held. The avoidance pride takes the hit first because it's the part of them that's been most inflated. And when it starts to crumble, they feel exposed, not to you, but to themselves. The silence you leave behind doesn't immediately soften their heart, but it does shake their sense of certainty. And that's where transformation quietly begins, in the space where ego can no longer hide behind emotional distance. When you go no contact, the entire power dynamic that once defined the relationship flips. For so long, the avoidant felt secure in knowing they had emotional control. They dictated the pace of the connection, how close things could get, and when to pull away. Their confidence didn't come from real security. It came from being desired while keeping their own feelings guarded. You were the one waiting, wondering, and reaching out. Every unanswered message or delayed response reinforced their sense of power. It wasn't always intentional, but it was deeply satisfying to their ego to know that you were still there, still invested, still orbiting around their emotional availability. When you go no contact, that balance shatters. Suddenly, they're no longer in control of the emotional tempo you are. The space that once protected them from vulnerability now works against them. They can't predict what you'll do next, can't assume you'll come back, and can't rely on the safety of your pursuit. The silence you create becomes a power shift that they can feel but can't quite explain. They may try to convince themselves they're unaffected, but the uncertainty gnaws at them. The one who used to hold emotional distance as leverage now finds themselves on the other side of it, unsure how to regain their footing. This reversal is especially unsettling because avoidants aren't comfortable when they're not in control. Their sense of calm relies on knowing they can manage closeness and distance on their terms. No contact removes that ability. You are no longer responding to their rhythms. You've created your own. The silence becomes your boundary, your form of communication, your power. And unlike before, they can't manipulate it. They can't use withdrawal to make you chase because you're already gone. They can't test your loyalty through neglect because you've stopped playing. The familiar emotional game no longer works. That's when their mind starts racing. They might wonder what changed, what you're doing, or if someone else has taken their place. The same distance they once valued now turns into anxiety. For the first time, they experience the discomfort they used to create for you. It's a mirror effect, the uncertainty, the longing, the unanswered questions, and it's humbling. The dynamic that once gave them confidence now exposes their vulnerability. The power they had wasn't real power at all. It was borrowed energy, sustained only by your effort to keep the connection alive. As time passes, they begin to realize that control without connection is hollow. The distance that once made them feel safe now feels cold and meaningless. The silence doesn't bring peace. It brings awareness. And whether they admit it or not, the shift forces them to see the truth. The person who truly holds the power in a relationship is the one who can walk away with self-respect intact. When you go no contact, you stop being a reflection of their ego and become a reflection of your own strength. The dynamic flips not because you played the game better, but because you chose to stop playing altogether. Peace is more powerful than proof because true strength in love isn't shown by how much you can fight to be seen. It's revealed in how calmly you can let go when someone refuses to see you. When you stop trying to convince an avoidant of your worth, you step out of the emotional tug of war that kept you trapped in their approval cycle. For so long, you may have been proving your value through effort, the way you stayed patient when they withdrew, the way you reached out first after conflict, the way you showed up even when they didn't. But the truth is, every time you fought for their attention, you unknowingly validated their ego. You kept the focus on how they felt about you instead of how you felt within yourself. When you finally choose peace over proof, everything changes. You stop seeking closure from a person who benefits from your confusion. You no longer explain your feelings to someone who doesn't listen. You stop performing emotional acrobatics to earn love that should have been freely given. In that stillness, you reclaim your power, not through confrontation, but through detachment. It's not indifference, it's clarity. You see that your peace was never meant to be bargained away, just to be understood. For the avoidant, this shift is disarming. They're used to the push and pull, the reassurance that no matter how far they retreat, you'll follow. When you stop chasing, you create a silence that speaks louder than any words could. It tells them that you've stopped auditioning for their affection. It shows them that your energy is no longer available for one-sided connections. This kind of peace unsettles them because it can't be manipulated. They can't argue with it, they can't charm it, and they can't control it. Your calmness exposes their chaos. What peace does that proof never could is turn your focus inward. Instead of trying to change someone else's behavior, you start tending to your own healing. You begin to notice how much energy you've spent proving that you were enough. You realize that love isn't supposed to be a debate you keep losing. The strength of no contact isn't about winning. It's about refusing to participate in what drains you. That decision, quiet and firm, sends a message far more powerful than any plea for understanding. It says, I don't need your validation to know my worth. And that's the moment the balance truly shifts. The avoidant may feel your absence as loss, but you experience it as liberation. The peace you choose doesn't just protect your heart, it restores it. It reminds you that walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means giving yourself back. In the end, peace is what remains when you stop explaining, stop defending, and stop proving. It's the space where self-worth finally breathes freely, untouched by the need for someone else to recognize it. When you finally step back from the chaos of chasing someone who keeps running, you begin to see everything clearly. You realize that it was never about fixing them or proving yourself. It was always about reclaiming your peace. Going no contact isn't a punishment or a power play. It's an act of self-respect. It's the quiet decision to stop participating in your own pain. Because when you stop trying to control how someone sees you, you start controlling how you see yourself. The truth is, an avoidance ego might crumble when you walk away, but your strength is what rises from that silence. You're no longer fueled by anxiety or waiting for validation. You're grounded in your own worth, steady in your boundaries, and free from emotional dependency. That's not loss, that's freedom. Love doesn't have to be a battlefield where you keep proving that you're enough. The right kind of love won't make you chase, it will meet you halfway. And the moment you understand that, you stop craving what drains you and start attracting what nourishes you. Your silence becomes your strength, your peace becomes your message, and your absence speaks volumes that words never could. So if you're standing in that quiet space after walking away, know this: peace is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of a new one. One where you're no longer defined by how someone else treated you, but by how beautifully you learned to treat yourself. Thank you for listening, for showing up for your own growth, and for choosing healing over chaos. Remember, your peace is power, your boundaries are beautiful, and your silence, when it comes from self-worth, will always speak louder than noise. Take care of your heart, protect your energy, and keep walking forward with quiet confidence. Thank you truly for your time, and may you always choose peace over proving.